AI is no longer just a tool for teams, it is becoming a tool for leaders. So, what happens when strategy, hiring, and decision making are influenced by machines? I'm Lianna Adams, and today I'm joined by Sandy Carter, Chief Business Officer at Unstoppable Domains, to explore what AI means for leadership and whether today's executives are truly ready for what's coming. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be a great conversation. I can just feel it.
Thank you. Um, I always like to start with, your journey, and if you could, please tell us a little bit more about your professional background.
Yeah. I didn't always want to be in tech. For a while, I wanted to be an astronaut and a doctor, but I found that technology was just so exhilarating and changing all the time. And there's no greater time for that change than today, right? Everything is moving so quickly. So when I began,
Absolutely.
I started out with some of the new, emerging tech things like cloud, which doesn't sound so emerging right now, but at one time, no one was really talking about the cloud. We had to really frame it up and explain it and educate the market. And then I was doing a lot around mobile, which again, at that time was super hot. And then most recently, I started looking at all the new emerging techs and how they converge together. So at IBM, I was looking at the cloud, and then I went to Amazon Web Services, continued looking at cloud, added in IoT, and then artificial intelligence. I actually started AI back in 2013, believe it or not. It's been a little bit over 10 years. And yes, the cloud did exist then. Everything wasn't just Chat GPT. And so I just had a really interesting career looking at all these different technologies. And then, the other piece I think that's interesting is that my role changed a lot. I was chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, chief product officer, chief strategy officer, head of BD. And so, it's always been interesting to explore things from other people's shoes. And that allows you to really empathize with others, which became one of my big superpowers as well.
That's amazing. And I think, having seen the evolution of tech and also experiencing from the lens of different roles, right? What parts of leadership can AI realistically replace, do you think? And what parts are still uniquely human?
Well, obviously today, AI can replace pattern recognition and data. It's so good at that. Optimization in several different areas like scheduling or even, routine decision making that follows a pattern. For example, we have agents that approve purchase orders up to a certain amount of money. We have a list, even as a manager, we used to have a list of look for these things. And AI does great at that. But if you think about your vision, like where do you want to go? What's your new idea? That really today isn't captured by artificial intelligence. You have to actually think of an idea in order to execute on it. I also think tone setting for your culture with humans is also uniquely human and navigating ambiguity. So let's say we go back to that purchase order. There will be times when you're going to approve the purchase order, even though maybe it doesn't fit a set of guidelines. For example, I know one time I was stuck in a severe storm, and the only car they had to rent was a convertible. Um, and so my boss approved me for the convertible, even though my company did not allow you to rent a convertible because it was more expensive. But he approved that. Why? Because I was in a bind. There were no more cars. So that's kind of like going outside of the boundaries. So I think capabilities that require emotional intelligence, even a lived experience, will be some of those things that stay uniquely human. And leaders who excel, who are really successful, I think are those who delegate those things that can be analyzed but double down on the inspirational pieces.
I really love how you've described it, and also, in terms of the examples, right, of the piano and with the convertible car. If AI consistently makes better data-driven decisions than you, are you still the leader or just the approver?
Oh no, you're still the leader for sure. So I think, if you think about it, um, the accountability still arrives with the human, right? And
Mm,
so that always has to be there. I always love to tell the story about Air Canada. When AI was just starting out, they were playing around with some agents, and one of their agents told a passenger who had just lost his father, "Hey, we offer 50% off your ticket because your father just died. When you get back from the funeral, call us up and we'll refund 50% of the ticket." Well, the gentleman did that, and the company said, "Oh, no, we don't have such a policy." Oh, that was the agent. That wasn't us. That was the AI agent that told you that. And so the guy, even though it was like $200, decided to make a point of it because he felt like companies needed to step up for accountability. And so he actually won the lawsuit because the court said, "Hey, if you have an AI agent that's making decisions on your behalf, the accountability still sits with you as the human, as the company. It doesn't sit with anyone else." So I do think that as the leader, I mean, think about the CEO. If you think about the role of a CEO, it's mostly inspiring. It's coming up with the next vision, it's coming up with where you're going. So you're kind of like CEO of your role, right? You're still getting things done with agents, but you are still the person in control.
and so are leaders in danger of hiding behind AI recommendations to avoid accountability? I mean, just to touch on accountability, right?
Yeah. You know, I don't, well, I guess some leaders could be. It's not the right thing to do, right? Because if a decision is being made, you need to understand how the agent is making the decision. You need to understand the data that's being used. One of my funniest examples was from IBM, where we were working on Watson, and we trained Watson on 33,000 romance novels. So 33,000 romance novels, that's a lot of content.
Wow.
But we showed it a picture of two sumo wrestlers. Obviously, sumo wrestlers are fighting, they're in conflict. But because we had only trained the model on romance novels, what do you think the result was? The caption for our picture turned out to be romantic, not in context with what was really happening with the sumo wrestlers. Leadership has to make the decision about the data, the quality of the data, um, what data is relevant, what is in context. I think that when you really get down to it, the prover role of what data you use, of what boundaries you put on an agent, is actually a very strategic role because you own the judgment about the impact, about the ethical considerations, about the readiness of the organization. So I think great leaders, if you think about this, great leaders have always relied on advisors that were smarter than themselves in specific domains. AI is simply the most powerful advisor that we've ever had.
Yeah, I really love that. And, because at one point I just thought, oh no, are we going to have a lot of people going, oh, the AI made me do it, or the AI did it, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just
and
not,
we
and
did. We started that way.
you know, but at the same time, yeah, I really resonate with what you've said, that the leaders still are still in control in that sense where, they are able to recognize the patterns as well, to lead, to have that foresight, right? But if an AI strategy outperforms your instinct, so then, I mean, it's a bit of an existential question, should your gut still matter?
Oh, I'm a strong believer in gut feel. And if you think back on it, um, most of the great innovations came from someone's gut, less than the data.
Hmm.
Steve Jobs would always make decisions based on, he would listen to customers, but he would translate what they said into the bigger vision, right? And if you think
Hmm.
about your gut, what is your gut really? Your gut is really a library of pattern recognition, right? It comes
Hmm.
from years of experience. It captures, data sets, if you would, from your gut that others may miss entirely, like timing of the market or team morale, or, think about relationship dynamics. Um, I was just working on closing a deal, and I recognized that the person I was working with was going through some things personally. And so, you know what? I let that kind of go to the side for a while, kept in
Hmm.
touch, make sure he was okay. And then when everything was back to normal, went back and closed that deal. That's something that a human can sense. That's using your EQ and understanding those relationship dynamics. So I do think your gut still matters. I think that the winning formula in my mind is using AI to pressure test your instinct, and then using your instinct to pressure test what AI tells you. So sometimes when I'm writing an article, I'll go to AI and I'll say, "Hey, help me with a headline for this. I want something that's SEO optimized, that's going to show up in Google Discover, all those things that you need." But sometimes, it just comes to you. Like one of my articles was tired, running on 4 hours of sleep and 10 cups of coffee. AI would never come up with that headline because it doesn't know what 4 hours of sleep and 10 cups of coffee means. So I think that when you do this pressure testing and you use your creativity, it still forces deeper insight, deeper inquiry to what you're looking at, but there's still value, much value in the gut.
Yeah, and I feel like with the gut, it also depends on the experiences that you've lived through, right?
Mhm.
And that's how your gut gets informed whether something is going to be potentially risky or bad or good. Um, you know, then does using AI make leaders more effective or quietly more replaceable? And I like to prefix this with like, what if you have a leader that would not make decisions until they prompt a model first, or cannot hold a position without prompting a model first, if that makes sense.
It does. This is such an excellent question because I actually witnessed this weekend with my daughter. I asked my daughter her opinion about something, and she said, "Wait just 1 second." And so I was watching her, and of course, she uses voice. She doesn't type, she doesn't use text, but she was asking AI for her opinion. And so she and I sat down and talked about, AI is there to supplement you. It shouldn't take your place. If I'm asking your opinion about something, that's very subjective. We ended up having almost a 45-minute discussion about it because she said to me, "I don't want to be wrong." And so, it's your opinion.
Wow.
You can't be wrong, right? So let's now switch over to leaders. I think leaders are going through the same thing. And
Hmm.
in my mind, AI really amplifies what leadership capacity you already have. So, in that regard, a strong leader, I think, gets stronger, and a weak leader becomes more exposed. So, if your value before was, "Oh, I only look at the data, I only look at the information, I don't use my gut feel, I don't use my experience, it's just like totally data driven," I think you do become replaceable. I think if your value in the past was judgment, how you influence others, how you execute, I think it makes you more indispensable. I think it makes you more valuable. So I think leaders investing in AI fluency today are really building a competitive moat around their career because they're really going to leverage and use that. But let's don't, I mean, and this is going to be another plea. One of the things I get asked a lot from parents is, what should I advise my son, my daughter? Make sure that you talk to them about this. Make sure that they shouldn't be afraid of making a mistake because mistakes are how you learn. It's how you build that experience. It is how AI will help you build a moat around your own career if you build up those experiences for yourself.
I really love that, and it is, and I love that had spoke to your daughter and spent some time like unpacking that, right? Because exactly, mistakes are what helps us, with our experiences, with our learning, and we shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. And I do see that quite a bit these days, especially in the younger generation. Mm, Maybe also, slightly older, right? Like anyone who's using AI, they've developed this little fear of, oh, I don't want to make a mistake, or in pursuit of perfection, right? So if you're so bringing back to leadership,
Mhm.
and if your team trusts AI insights more than your direction, for example, is that a threat or a leadership failure?
So, if your team goes to AI more than they go to you.
Yeah,
Mm,
if they trust the AI more
mhm.
than your direction.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that trust follows competence. And what I mean
Mm.
by that is that if a leader hasn't built up their own credibility through consistent good judgment, I think AI will naturally fill that vacuum. The best leaders, like I want my teams using AI insights.
Mm.
I want them to take advantage of all the tools and teammates that are out there. I think the key is integrating those into that insight into like a shared vision that the team co-owns. The real failure to me is when a leader competes with AI for authority. And I've seen this part to happen too, instead of leveraging it to elevate the entire team's performance. So I've heard of companies, I'm sure you have too, where they don't allow you to use tools, these AI tools.
Mhm.
And I do think that a lot of that is being a little afraid of what happens when you're not the authority. Some people ruled in leadership by holding all the cards in information, right? But if
Yeah.
you as a leader have really built up credibility, you can inspire the team, you can help them all pull together towards a vision. That's again something that AI can't do. And I think that depending upon the type of leader, you would view it as a threat or as even stronger leadership.
Yeah, and I would think, with that, you would want to improve yourself, and I think, like you said, in terms of building trust, there's a certain kind of leadership that does build trust, and the team will trust your guidance, and if there is a mistake, they will all own it together, and so yeah, I really love how you've explained that. And what will AI lower the number of leadership roles, or simply expose weak leadership faster, do you think?
Well, I think again, it comes down to like it depends, right? I think middle management roles that were built around relaying information and status reporting. And I've been in lots of
Mm.
big companies where there's a lot of roles like that. I think you're already seeing that. That layer is being compressed, that layer is going away. I think roles where you're anchored in the strategy, the vision, the culture, cross-functional alignment. I think those will grow in importance as as AI comes into the organization, because organizations are going to need to move faster, and people who understand those can drive those. I mean, someone's got to ask the questions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you sit down at a prompting screen, someone's got to ask the questions. If you're coding an agent, somebody's got to know what it does. Like that product management skill is still really powerful, because if you don't know what you're doing, the agent that comes out, the app that comes out is not going to be as good. So I think ultimately, in my opinion, um, that performance, and it'll be easier to see who adds real value. I think it'll be easier to identify than those who don't.
And also it's, who um uses it to in a way everyone's advantage, right? And yeah, so again, it really depends. So I really appreciate what you've said. What leadership skill becomes more important in an AI-driven workplace, do you think?
Oh, wow. Well, I think for one, what is really fascinating to me, I wrote an article about this. So the number of roles from 24 to 25 for storytellers, communications, storytellers grew 6x. Someone who can, tell that engaging story, can make all the pieces fit together, can look at it in an out of the box situation. AI can really generate the analysis, but I think humans need a leader who can translate the story into meaning and motivation. So if you look at LinkedIn jobs from 24 to 25, 5 times as number of job postings for storytellers. I think another skill set that's going to become more important is contextual judgment. So not just judgment, but contextual judgment. So like that example I gave you of the court, of the convertible, who has the ability to weigh the recommendation against your culture, your timing, your ethics, the human impact it will have. Think about it, right? If I'm in Walmart, I'm going to make one decision about pricing. If I'm in Patagonia, I might make another, because my culture is about the environment. And so, who's going to be able to weigh the recommendations against what your organization stands for, against your ethics, against your human impact? I think all of that will become more important. And I'll just do one more because I like threes. Adaptive learning. I'm telling
Mhm.
everybody, I just spoke at a high school, the ability to learn, to be a continuous learner, to constantly update your mental model, because AI is going to continue to evolve quarter after quarter. I mean, think about, last quarter, OpenClaw did not exist. Now you've got OpenClaw that's, clawing its way everywhere. So now you've got to switch your model again. So I do think that you really have to be someone who loves to learn and be willing to adapt in that learning. Someone explained it this way to me with 3 Gs. You have to have a growth mindset that encompasses that contextual judgment. You have to be able to have grace. That's that EQ, the whole area of ensuring that, you're making the right decisions, not just because of a rule book or a framework. And then I think the last one is grit. You gotta really go after it. I don't know about you, but like sometimes I'll ask AI a question and it's not there, and I'll ask again and again and again. And it seems to me like the AI gets tired, but not me. I have to like I have to make this thing work. So I think grace, grit, and growth.
Yeah, human tenacity is something to be reckoned with, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and so are we, and AI is definitely going to be in our lives. That's for sure. It's not going away. Are we training future leaders to think or to prompt?
This is the question. This is the question. it's just like my daughter, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
was so excited when her school allowed them to use AI tools. I love that. But what about the critical thinking? Are they now raising her, are they teaching her to be a critical thinker? I'm trying to raise her to be a critical thinker. Because,
Mhm.
if you think about prompting, if you prompt without that critical thinking, you produce very polished, something that's
Yeah.
mediocre, polished mediocre. And that's not what you want to do. The real skill gap is knowing what questions to ask even before you open up the tool, right? So I think our schools, and I'm really, really, really passionate about our schools. I think our leadership development programs, I think they need to prioritize first principle thinking, right? Like, what is the real goal? What's the real business need? So first principles in a business is you got to make money. How do you prioritize that? How do you prioritize ethical frameworks?
Yeah.
It was so funny
Yeah.
because I was at a conference last week, and this one company, and I won't say who the company is, but the agent was approved to uh, was granted access to approved POs up to 50K. And the agent figured out how to change its limit to 500K. So think about that, right? So
Wow.
somebody missed a framework there. Somebody missed a decision-making framework. And they, just like you wouldn't allow an employee who's in engineering to have access to HR records or someone in HR to have access to all your financials, you have to think through that. I think the best leaders will do both. They'll think deeply about a problem and then prompt strategically to accelerate and validate their thinking.
I really love that. And, and I do share your sentiment for the schools. And, and as much as I want schools to adopt AI with their in education, there's another layer that needs to happen, which is also to let, to educate the parents, so that there's a whole ecosystem that's helping the student excel with AI, right? Um, and yeah, I really love how you think about, future leaders and critical thinking. So 5 years from now, Sandy, what will separate leaders who thrive with AI from those who get sidelined by it?
Let's see. I would say those who have built AI into their daily decision-making workflow, they think of it as a thinking partner, a brainstorming partner, and they started doing this years ago. It's not something that just popped in like 5 years from
Mhm.
now. Like they've been doing this for a while. I think sideline leaders will either be those who ignored AI completely or outsourced their judgment completely to it. I think both extremes lose.
Hmm.
Think about that. The differentiator is really about adaptability. Leaders who continuously learn, experiment, evolve their, I don't know, relationship, I guess I would say, with
Hmm.
AI will stay ahead of every curve.
That's amazing. And Sandy, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on what leadership looks like in the age of AI. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. If I could I also just add in something about my book?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So I wrote a book called AI First, Human Always. And I wrote this book for really people who are starting out with artificial intelligence so that they could understand what should stay AI and what should stay human. The title really says it all. AI first, right? Leverage AI, but human, that human piece needs to come into it. And I was the first book to ever have an AI agent with it. So when you buy the book, you get the AI agent, and the AI agent does a couple of things. It enables you to do many of the things we just talked about, right? Prompt some of the questions that you have, from the concepts in the book, but also it enables you to be updated. So I completely train the models every week on my Forbes articles. I train it on research I do for the Digital Economist. Like I just wrote a whole article, a whole 40-page paper on OpenClaw, for example. So it just enables you to use and leverage all the new data. So if you're interested in learning more, obviously reach out to me or, go grab the book. I think that would be really helpful too.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I really love the fact that your book comes with an agent as well. That's amazing.
The
Like,
first
what?
book too. That's cool, right?
That is so cool. That is next level. What an experience that would be. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And to our listeners, the future of leadership won't be defined by who uses AI, but by who uses it wisely. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.